Good morning. I'm George Benson, Dean of the Terry College. Welcome to Terry Third Thursday, and it's not just any Terry Third Thursday. This happens to be the 75th in this series of programs, so we're sort of celebrating that today, if you will. For those of you who are here for the first time, and I know there are a few of you, this facility is home to our executive MBA program and to our certified financial planner problem. And I say it's their home in the sense that we have staff and residents here for those two programs. We do many other things, of course, here. For example, earlier this month, we had a week-long advanced School of Marketing Research here, which we do with the American Marketing Association. Earlier this week, our Board of Overseers met here. Later this morning, after this event, our Capital Campaign Steering Committee will be meeting here. We are also currently building out additional space up on the third floor. And by the way, you're certainly welcome to tour the facility after we're done today. It's the first floor, this part of the second floor, and most of the third floor. So we're building out additional space in anticipation of announcing one or two new programs within the next 6 months. So hopefully you'll be hearing a lot more about that very soon. I want to, as always, recognize our sponsors, the people that make this event possible, people that allow us to charge as relatively little as we do for this event. First, our premier corporate sponsor, Bank of North Georgia. Elizabeth Livengood, are you here today? Elizabeth is going to be here. Elizabeth. Elizabeth, thank you very much, and thank Kessel for me too. Our newest corporate sponsor is Deloitte, and I think there are a few people from Deloitte here today. Would you please stand right over here at this table? Thank you very much for helping us. And finally, our two longtime media sponsors from the Atlanta Business Chronicle. Bill Chandler is here as always. Bill, thank you very much. Please give my thanks to Ed Baker as well. For Atlanta Business News, read ABC. Great publication. And from Public Broadcasting Atlanta, as always, Harriet Hoskins Aberhall, and also Reed Haggard is with us this morning. Thank both of you for all that you've done for us over the years. And Harriet, this is the third Thursday, and that means you probably have an announcement for us.
Good morning, all. Oops. Good morning. Last time I was here last month, we were just coming to the end of a record-breaking, as it turned out, radio pledge drive. This has been particularly beneficial for us because it means now I think that we're going to be able to expand our news department, so you'll be hearing more local news from WABE from now on. We did have the election broadcast, which you may have heard. One of the things we're doing locally on television is in January, an extraordinary program called Lives for Sale. It's actually local, and it's pretty disturbing. It's on human trafficking, and we will be doing a town forum afterwards to discuss this really great blot and slur on our local community. I've told you we've had a successful radio drive. We have a television drive in December, and of course December's the end of the financial year, right, Deloitte? And I was reading the New York Times this week, I'm taking extra, sorry, that IRA is the most heavily taxed asset, but if you want to give from your IRA, not only do you get a tax deduction for serving a non-profit, you may, subject to what Georgia law is, also get that donation tax-free, so you're not taxed on the IRA money that you provide. So think about that for all your favorite charities. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. By the way, the same thing applies to the Terry College if you'd like to. This morning's program is our final Terry Third Thursday for this year. We always take a break in December, and then we fire up again in January, and we've got a very strong set of speakers to lead off the year. January 18th, Martin Flanagan, who's the president and CEO of Investcap, which is one of the world's largest investment managers. It's headquartered in London and has offices in 19 countries around the world. And I know you'll enjoy that presentation. Then February 15th, a special friend of the Terry College, even if he is an alum from Alabama, and that's Richard Anthony, the chairman and CEO of Cenovus. Cenovus, as most of you know, is a $30 billion holding company with banks sprinkled across Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, Florida, and Tennessee. And one of those banks happens to be our premier corporate Terry Third Thursday sponsor, the Bank of North Georgia. March 15th, another one you definitely won't want to miss. John Van Vlissingen will be with us. It's a name that's not familiar perhaps to many of you, but hopefully after you come it will be. John is chairman of BCD Holdings, and BCD Holdings includes BCD Travel, which is the third largest business travel company in the world, I think after American Express and Carlson Wagon Lee. Also, they own Park and Fly, which some of us use at the airport or other airports around the country. TRX, which is a leading provider of transaction processing, back office stuff for the travel industry and other industries. And Delft China. John is from the Netherlands. His family has been involved with business over there for, I dare to say, hundreds of years. One of the most interesting people that I've ever met. And John is also our senior international executive lecturer at the Terry College, which means he's not in residence there all the time, but he comes in for a couple days in the fall and a couple days in the spring and brings people in or presents programs himself, things about, for example, he might talk about the family business, which he's obviously been heavily involved in. Quite an individual, and I recommend that you try to get to that one. You can register for any of those events on our Terry website, or you can talk to Jill Walton, who is sitting over here eating right now. Jill, I got a picture at a good time. Please stand up. Jill's our Director of Alumni Relations. As I noted earlier, this is the 75th anniversary, if you will, for the Terry Third Thursday Speaker Series. We've had, for those of us involved with it, 75 different speakers. It's hard to even grapple with, given it just started not too long ago. And they've been alumni and they've been non-alumni. They've been from all over the world, mainly business people, but some government, some sports stars as well. Terry Third Thursday was Terry's first major foray into Atlanta, if you will. That is since 1955. And you may recall, I've told you on one or two other occasions, that in 1955 there was an evening division, an Atlanta evening division of the University of Georgia, obviously here, and it was teaching business programs, and it was run by what is now the Terry College out in Athens. Well, it became so successful that in 1955 the Board of Regents spun it off, and today we call it Georgia State University. So from about 1955 to about 2000 we did very little down here, and we changed all that with this speaker series, and that led to an executive MBA program and an evening MBA program, a director's college, a certified financial planners program, and so on. We began Terry Third Thursday in the Atlanta Financial Center. Fortunately, at that time, the university had opened an alumni center there. In those days, we called it an alumni club. Now it's an alumni center. That opened in February of 2000, and we jumped right on that. It gave us a foothold, if you will, a toehold in Atlanta. We opened Terry Third Thursday the next month in March of 2000, and Jeff Arnold, who you may remember from WebMD, and WebMD was hot back then, was our inaugural speaker. Since roughly 2002, our alumni board has been heavily involved with Terry Third Thursday, helping us improve it, helping us get the speakers. And that was under the leadership initially of the late Lindsay Hopkins, and now currently under Richard Quartz IV, who is with us this morning. And we moved into this facility then in February 2005. All of us at Terry College are very proud of what this series has helped us do, the speaker series. It's helped us weave the Terry College into the fabric of the business community in oh so many ways. It's given us a presence here, a physical presence here, which has meant an awful lot to us. It's brought people to us and programs to us. It's helped our students land jobs in and around Atlanta. It's been a remarkable addition to our portfolio of assets. The tradition of excellence continues today with this morning's speaker, and I'm going to turn it over now to Richard Quartz to introduce our speaker. Richard is vice president with Carter. Carter, as many of you know, is a real estate development, management, and investment company. Richard has served on our alumni board since 2002. He is a 1995 finance graduate of the Terry College, and Richard, we're very proud of you. And that shows through the fact that he won the 2006 Outstanding Young Alumnus for the Terry College. And congratulations again on that, Richard. He is here this morning in his capacity as chairman of the Terry Third Thursday Task Force within our alumni board. Richard, come on up.
Thank you, George. And before I go any further, many people in this room know this, but many of you may not. The Terry College is losing George to the presidency of the College of Charleston. This is officially going to happen February of next year. So unfortunately, I'm a little remiss. This is George's last Terry Third Thursday as our dean. And I apologize. George is he's an amazing guy, done a wonderful job for us. We were lucky to have him. His willingness to take risks. Just this room we're in is an example of the huge risk that George has taken. Things like, and I'm not going to read this list, but there are hundreds of things that George has done for this university over his tenure, and we are really just grateful for your willingness to push us hard. The alumni board, your board of overseers, we all appreciate all the hard work we're going to miss you. So George, thank you for all your hard work. We do wish you and Jan great success at College of Charleston, and you're all welcome to go down and play golf with George down there in Charleston. They have many great courses. I'm sure he'll be very happy down there, but we're going to miss you here at the university. It is my pleasure to introduce Lisa Borders to you this morning. President Borders was first elected as our City Council President on August 10th of 2004 in a special election. She was then re-elected by an overwhelming majority in 2005's regular election. As a president, she presides over the City Council meetings, she appoints committee chairs, and she works closely with the mayor's office. Her community initiatives include increasing the availability of affordable housing here in Atlanta, addressing the metro area's traffic concerns, and promoting neighborhood safety and preservation. Outside of her office as president, she's a senior vice president with Cousins Properties here in Atlanta. Her duties include, but are not limited to, marketing, communications, and community reinvestment. She is also a trustee of the Westminster Schools, on the board of the Clark Atlanta University here in Atlanta, and is a director of St. Joseph's Healthcare Systems. But she's here this morning to talk to us about the possibilities of progress in Atlanta. So with that, I will give the podium to Ms. Borders.
Well, good morning. Good morning. That's right. It's a lovely day in Atlanta. I'm delighted to be here. Richard, thank you for that gracious introduction. And Dean Benson, we certainly wish you all of the best. It's been an exciting run for you here at Terry. Let's give him another hand. You know, as I was listening to all that's going on at the Terry College of Business, I thought, you know, it's very similar to what's going on in Atlanta. There's lots of activities. There are lots of people involved. You've got your administrators, you've got your overseers, you've got your alumni, you've got students. You got a lot going on, not to mention a long and rich history since 1955 here in the city. And you spun that little thing off called Georgia State. Thank God I got a child just finishing Georgia State in December. Only have one. He's 24. And I keep telling people, good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, he will graduate and get off the family dole here and go make his living in Atlanta. So thank you for doing that to the Terry College. You know, it's interesting in Atlanta, folks are asking every day, how do you like doing what you're doing? I love it. I am here to report that wonderful things are going on in the city. I have the privilege and the pleasure of serving with an extraordinary mayor, my sister in service, the Honorable Shirley Franklin. Y'all know who that is, right? That little piece of leather, but she's well put together. You know, girlfriend takes no tea for the fever. When she came into office in 2002, Atlanta faced some tremendous challenges, not the least of which was our water and sewer crisis. And we read every day about where we are in that $3 billion project. Do y'all know how many zeros a billion is? That's a lot of activity and a lot of work that needed to be done. We had not addressed our sewer system since 40 years ago, perhaps. It was Mayor Hartsfield who said that the mayor that dealt with the water and sewer system would be the one that made significant progress in the city, because that's an infrastructure that we absolutely must have for the growth of our city. Now, Atlanta has looked at or has enjoyed significant growth over the last 5 or 6 years. We actually saw a population decrease and decline from 1980 till about 2000. We now see excitement about the city. We see a massive influx of folks coming back to the city, not the least of which reasons is because we think we're running it right these days. Would you all agree? We're doing a better job in Atlanta of running the city, much like a business. Are y'all awake? Are you with me here? The city has done tremendous things, and it is through no accident, but very much deliberate and focused attention, primarily because the mayor has taken the leadership role. My definition of leadership is passion turned into action. And I would tell you that Shirley Franklin, her team, my colleagues on council and myself are very, very passionate about the city. It is not perfect. We understand that. It is not a panacea, but we aspire to be the panacea. We aspire to be great in Atlanta. So what does that mean? That means we must look at the issues that we have before us. We must recognize how and why we must make ourselves better and never languish or be satisfied with where we are today. So Mayor Franklin and the council spent the first 2, 3, 4 years working reactively, working on problems that were there when they walked in the door. I didn't have the privilege to begin to serve until 2004, as Richard told you, through a special election. But from 2002 to 2004, the water and sewer crisis was the biggest crisis on the horizon. Mayor Franklin and her team clearly went to the state, sought to work with others, not only here at the local level, but also at the state and the federal level to work collaboratively to solve our problem. Very much like we do in business when we look at an entire enterprise to figure out where are the resources to help us solve a problem. So we sort of dropped back and punted and thought, what are the principles that we should use? We need to be accountable. We need to be transparent. We need to understand that we have to build consensus and work as a team, not just as a silo in the city of Atlanta, but with those jurisdictions that surround us, because everything that happens in Atlanta dramatically impacts our neighbors on all sides. Everything we do positively, sometimes CNN reports that, but everything that happens negatively, where does that go? Everywhere, right? So we are keenly aware that we need to do things well in Atlanta. So the water and sewer issue is the one that the mayor talked about for the bulk of her administration on her first run. As we have worked since then, we have had some additional successes, not the least of which is 5 successive balanced budgets in the city of Atlanta. Can I get an amen? Now, while that doesn't seem like a lot, perhaps, Atlanta didn't always do that. Now, when we run our individual businesses, I'm sure we teach this at the Terry College of Business, that you should balance your budget, right? Well, in municipal government, that is not often done, but the mayor was determined not only to balance the budget, but to rebuild the reserves in the city of Atlanta, and we have done that over these last 5 years. We are on track to continue to do that. We have also changed from a calendar year to a fiscal year. So now we run from July 1st to June 30th. And while that may not seem like a big thing, it had never ever been done in the history of the city of Atlanta. So we have taken on business principles, many best practices that we have reached out and tried to learn from our urban peers all across the country. What is best in class? How do you accomplish that? And then what are the resources that we need to get the job done? So the mayor has done this. The council has worked in tandem with the mayor to get these objectives accomplished. Now, I tell you that the council has worked in tandem, but those of you who have lived in Atlanta for a long time know that that has not always been the case. The council and the mayor have typically been at odds. True? None of you all have ever lived in Atlanta very long, right? Okay, well, let me just tell you from a historical perspective as a native Atlantan, we have not always enjoyed a good relationship. I have a wonderful relationship with the mayor. We do not agree on every single thing, but I would suggest to you that we agree on 95% of things, and when we disagree without being disagreeable. You will never see me or Shirley Franklin in the newspaper having an argument. We don't do that. That's not productive. We have a conversation and we decide what we're going to do and who's going to play which role. It is very constructive and very instructive. And so the tenor and the tone of the conversation, and I will tell you it is a conversation at City Hall, has changed dramatically. For those of you who watch Channel 26, the City Channel, anybody watch Channel 26? Oh, good, you all have a life. You're not watching us on Channel 26. There used to be a time when there was significant discord even amongst the council, particularly during full council meetings. That is no longer the case. There is spirited debate, but we have a whole new tenor and tone that has been set at the council. And primarily the principle is disagree without being disagreeable. And at the end of the day, there is a finite period during which you may have the conversation. Ultimately, the question must be called, the votes must be taken, we must move forward with the decision that we have made. So once you've had your opportunity to speak, represent your jurisdiction or your particular geography in the city, you must vote. A vote is governed by 8 votes. A law can be passed with 8 votes at the City Council. There are 15 members of council. So you can see that the majority of the folks must agree on a particular ordinance or resolution to have it passed in the city. There is significant discussion that goes on before those meetings. There is significant research that's done before those meetings so that everyone understands what objective we're trying to accomplish. Sounds like business? We communicate, communicate, communicate. And we explain to folks not only what is beneficial for them, but more importantly and strategically what is beneficial for the entire city of Atlanta. Because oftentimes what's good for one particular area of the city may in fact compete with what's good for the entire city. So I spend a significant amount of my time building consensus between different district members, between the mayor's side of the house and the council side of the house, so that when I call the question and ask for the vote, I know what the vote is going to be. So for the record, every controversial vote on my watch, with the exception of one, has always been taken and received as 12-3. 12-3. Do y'all understand what that means? Significant consensus has been built, particularly on difficult issues. The vast majority of the council is very much in agreement with the direction that we should take. So what that means is we've been able to be progressive in Atlanta. We've been able to understand where the mission is, what the task is, how we're going to get there, and then in fact take the vote, send it over to the mayor's office so that she and her team can execute on a daily basis. We are the policymakers on the legislative side of the house. The mayor's side of the house is the executive branch, and she and her team are charged with running the city every single day. Now, from time to time, folks get a little bit confused, and each of us is playing in the other's sandbox. I tell folks all the time, why are you doing that? You're in their sandbox, and besides that, you're throwing sand. Let's not do that. Get back in your box. If you are invited into play, then you may go over and play, but you may not throw sand when you go to the other sandbox. So things are working between the two branches of government, the executive and the legislative branch, which is extremely helpful. So we reacted to a lot that was going on in the city beginning in 2002. We now have the opportunity, having accomplished the mayor, do you all remember the $82 million deficit that Shirley took on? $82 million deficit. We cut jobs, we slashed budgets, we got our financial house in order, 5 successive years of balanced budgets, got the water and sewer issue on track. And so now we have the opportunity to be proactive about what's going on in the city of Atlanta. So let's talk about that. We're sitting in Buckhead today. There are 14 projects going on, development projects in Buckhead alone. You walk outside or you stand in your office buildings and look out the windows and you can see cranes going on, activity going on all across the city. I was in downtown Atlanta yesterday at Development Day is what they called it, and they talked about $2.5 billion worth of projects going on in downtown Atlanta. $2.5 billion. That's a lot of zeros. There's a lot of job creation. There's a lot of activity going on in the city and interest and a commitment in what's happening in Atlanta. So our financial house is in order. Folks are often asking us about, tell us about the departments and how the city actually works. Well, now we are trying to work together, the city as well as other parts, other jurisdictions, to ensure that Atlanta stays on track. Internally, we are working in our individual departments like planning. How many of you all are developers? Any developers in here? Only one? Interesting. Well, you know, development is to Atlanta what the automotive industry is to Detroit or the entertainment industry is to LA. And development has helped drive the development, no pun intended, of the city. And so today we recognize that if we don't fix the permitting problem, and we've often had complaints about the duration, the time it takes to actually get a permit in Atlanta. Well, let me give you some statistics. In 2005, we issued 40,000 permits. 40,000 permits, and we're on track to do more than that in 2006. During 2005 and part of 2006 year to date, the highest number of days that it took to get a permit was 147. That's a long time. For folks in the development business, that actually costs you money because you can't start building until you have your permit. Today, the lowest number of days, a significant improvement over 147, 48 days. 48 days. And how have we done that? With focused attention, dedicated resources, looking at re-engineering that process, co-locating reviewers of plans. So taking some really hard looks at not only what we do, but how we do it, looking internally and not being satisfied even with the progress that we are making. Calibrating or recalibrating expectations based on our performance, not on what we promised that we're going to do, but in fact what we're delivering on what we're doing. So when we look at the city, our effort is to ensure that the economic vitality and viability of the city is ongoing. We want folks in New York to issue bonds and say that we are a good city in which to invest. We are a great place for folks to live. So let's talk about some of that. Quality of life issues. Anybody? Well, I guess you guys came early today, so you didn't have trouble in the traffic, right? Nobody had trouble with traffic today. But you do have trouble with traffic in Atlanta on a consistent basis. We are to some extent choking on our own success because we have what? A love affair with our automobiles? Everybody drove today, right? Everybody drove today. But we also don't have a comprehensive public transit system. We have MARTA, and frankly, I'm a big proponent of public transportation. I hear complaints about MARTA a lot, and I will tell you, it's not perfect either. But we have millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of infrastructure already invested. If we have a problem in our business, do we just shut the business down and walk away? No, we typically fix the problem that's in our business. So I would tell you that MARTA is a very viable public transit system. It has the ability and the capacity to serve as a regional transit system and certainly as the spine of a regional transit system. When you look at MARTA, and we tend to look at it in a vacuum, it is the only system of its size, scope, and scale in the nation providing rail, bus, and paratransit service that does not have state support. Public transportation is a quality of life issue. It's not supposed to make money. There are no systems across this nation, none, public transit systems, that make money. That is not what it's supposed to do. We're supposed to move people around the city and around the region. So I would submit to you that where we have issues with MARTA, we need to examine them and we need to fix them rather than say this is a system we're going to throw away. That's just crazy talk. So I want you to know that there are no proponents at the city level who are willing to say that MARTA's not a good thing. What we say is let's fix it where there are deficiencies and let's leverage it and build upon it so that we don't choke on our own success. We cannot build our way out of the transportation issue in the city. We just cannot do it. So that's transportation. Affordable housing. We saw recently a study that said that Atlanta is becoming like San Francisco and New York and some of the other cities where it's not affordable for middle-class America to live in the city. I would tell you that affordable housing is in fact a challenge for us in Atlanta. A single-family residential home is the staple in our city, and that's a great thing, but the average price is $240,000. So you can just do the math. When you have a teacher, a fireman, a policeman, or a nurse, they can't afford to live in the city of Atlanta. And we are not trying to be an exclusive community, which means we need to pay attention and find a way for those good folks to live in our city, because we certainly, y'all want policemen, right? We want firefighters, right? You want teachers? What about nurses? Okay, so we need to find a way for them to live in our city. We have the opportunity, because there is significant, what we would call clean dirt from a development perspective, right? There's plenty of clean dirt in the city to develop. There's not only clean dirt, there is even dirty dirt, brown economic fields, which we can certainly revitalize and reuse, much like Atlantic Station did with Atlantic Steel. And then everybody's seeing the big development in the Business Chronicle, well done, about the Midtown. You termed it a Midtown monster. Why'd you like that term, monster? Yeah, there you go. It's going to be magnificent. Mixed use is the new prototype started over at Atlantic Station. I would tell you that's one of the exciting things going on in Atlanta. Atlantic Station is becoming a prototype for the nation. Mixed use, commercial, residential, and retail, all in one location, co-located, and now the folks in Midtown have picked up on that model and they are running with it. We are becoming an example of what to do, good urban land use for the entire country. So we are exhibiting leadership, but we're also addressing some of the challenges like transportation and affordable housing through mixed use development. So not only are we identifying our problems, we are identifying our solutions, and they are homegrown solutions. The mastermind or the architect behind Atlantic Station, his name was Brian Leary. He's a graduate of Georgia Tech, wrote his senior thesis on converting Atlantic Steel to Atlantic Station. And today you see the fruits of his labor. It is so large, it has its own zip code, 30363, okay? It has its own police precinct, and they're now talking about needing their own fire station because it is such a large development. But it is a work, learn, live, play environment. Mixed incomes with folks of all ages living together. And see, we see this replication now in Midtown. So there's activity going on in development. There's activity going on with all the new destinations. People have been to the aquarium, right? If you haven't, 3 million people have already beat you there. So you need to go. The new World of Coke is coming online. The new development at the Symphony, the King Papers. You all familiar with the King Papers? Who's contributed to the King Papers? Come on now, that's a native son. We have got to keep the King Papers. We have gotten them here in the city of Atlanta. They will be on display at the History Center. They will primarily, I think, reside at Morehouse College. They're a national treasure, and they're going to stay right here in the city of Atlanta. So there's tremendous activity going on. I did not mention the Beltline, so let me mention that for just a second. You guys familiar with the Beltline? The 22-mile loop that goes around the interior of the city. Think of it as a 285 on train tracks, okay? On the inside of the city, connects some 45 neighborhoods. 45 neighborhoods. We are a community in Atlanta of neighborhoods. We believe the Beltline will do three things. It will serve as an economic engine for the city of Atlanta, second only to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, which is the #1 economic engine, not just for Atlanta and the state of Georgia, but for the southeastern United States. So the Beltline will serve as a second economic engine for the city. Second, it will give us the opportunity to create significant additional green space for the city of Atlanta, which is a quality of life issue. We know that folks like to live near parks, and when they have that opportunity, they do so. And when you have parks, it drives residential development, ultimately followed by retail, because we always say retail follows rooftops, and then ultimately you can have commercial development as well. So exciting, exciting things, but the last thing that the Beltline does is offers us an opportunity to create some additional transit alternatives. The Beltline in and of itself will reside on underutilized and abandoned railroad track currently owned by CSX and Norfolk Southern. So we've got folks who are coming at the table, allowing us to redeploy assets that are no longer in use for them or that are minimally at use that will be helpful to the city. Now that's a much longer term project, but that's an exciting project. The green space alone will allow us to replicate Piedmont Park 6 times. Can you imagine replicating Piedmont Park 6 times? That's a lot of green space. The fact that it covers 45 neighborhoods and connects every council district makes it politically very viable. Let me tell you, we didn't have a hard time getting those votes because every community will have the opportunity to benefit, if not directly, indirectly from the development of the Beltline. A longer term horizon, it will take us 15 to 20 years to build out the entire project, but extremely exciting. We call it the Emerald Necklace, and there is no other project like it anywhere in these United States. So I would tell you that there's a lot of activity. I keep using that word because there's also momentum in the city. We see that the population declined over 20 years. We see it has picked up now in the last 5 or 6 years, and it is projected, and mind you, there's a little controversy going on, which we love in the city in this sense. The Atlanta Regional Commission has projected that another 2.3 million people will come here over the next 20 to 25 years. And that Atlanta's pro rata share is about 500 to 535,000 people. We've done some internal numbers at Cousins, and we're coming up with over 800,000 people. What's the difference? The Atlanta Regional Commission typically looks backwards. They use census data. They take a retrospective to project forward. We at Cousins have said we believe that there is actually some dynamic indices going on in the city, that folks are coming in faster than we might imagine. We are the #2 city in terms of student population, second only to Boston. Were you guys aware of that? So the intellectual capital that we have here that's being organically grown and developed here is huge. So the kids alone, if we could just get the kids to stay here, which would be enhanced by affordable housing and transportation solutions, our tax base will grow tremendously. So whether you agree that it's 500,000 or 800,000, a whole lot of people are coming to Atlanta in the next 15 to 20 years. So, I would submit to you, we have been reactive in the first part of the Franklin administration. We are now being proactive and looking out what are our issues, how do we solve them, how do we plan for them, how do we prepare for them. And I would like to tell you that we've got significant cooperation and participation, not only at the public level, but from the private sector as well. The public-private partnership is the model that has worked for the city for years, and we continue to leverage that model. And we now enjoy the benefit of a tremendous positive relationship with the business community, hopefully joined by folks from the Terry Business College that come out and work with the city as well. And so we will continue to use that model because it has been so helpful to us. So I dumped my bucket this morning. I'm here to tell you that I'm excited about what's going on in Atlanta. I'm happy about what's going on in Atlanta, but I'm not satisfied with what's going on in Atlanta. We still have significant work to do, but I'd like to stop and open the floor, if I might, for any questions that you might have about anything I've talked about or anything that perhaps I didn't talk about, if that's okay.
It is, and would you please remind me that you're intending to archive this on our website. This will be available probably tomorrow. Please use the microphone and answer questions.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to. We have a problem that I feel if we reach your desk, it would be resolved.
Okay.
Because it deals with progress.
Okay.
For over 25 years, I have rented 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom condominiums in a complex known as Far Court Condominiums. This complex is adjacent to Buckhead Plaza, where they've built 20-story buildings, they're building a hotel and so forth. Well, the developers of Buckhead Plaza need the property where Far Court condominiums exist. There are 56 units. The developers, through brokers, made an offer to buy the complex about a year ago, and the 46 owners of Far Court agreed to the deal. But it's been bogged down with some neighborhood zoning committee that came out of the blue, and so it's not going through. It's clearly in the best interest of the city to replace a 60-year-old complex of 2-story buildings with a modern building. I understand the developers want to build a 7-story modern building, but they can't do it unless the city gives them a permit, and they haven't been able to obtain that permit.
Right. Well, thank you for your question, and I'll be happy to look into it. I think the representative for that district is Howard Shook. Is that correct? It's.
I guess. I don't know.
You think it's Howard? Okay. I'll talk to Ms.
I have a summary here that I'd be glad to leave with you.
Okay. This gentleman came prepared. This is the Terry College of Business. He came prepared. Hats off to you. I will certainly be happy to look into that. I will need to talk to the district representative first. I always say they're on point, so yes, we'll be happy to look into it. You know, the neighborhood planning unit system it's an interesting system. We're the only country or the only city in the country that has that system, and it offers the public and the folks at the ground level in the communities the opportunity to speak on what they think we should do or should not do. But we do need to work through that a little bit better, a little bit faster. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than folks would like for it to take, so I'll be happy to take a look at that. You're welcome. Harriet.
I guess I'm a member of the Lindridge Martin Manor Association, sort of Lindbergh Drive area, and there are some 300 homes in our little association, and we are being surrounded by new developments of condominiums and the like in every direction. And I really wonder who gives these permits and whether they really look at the total aspect of development in the area and what that does to the community, the traffic, and all the other aspects that are impacted by a much larger population living there.
Sure. Who gives the permit? The city issues the permit, but it's a long vetting process, to be honest with you. The Department of Planning is primarily responsible for it at the city, but before it ever gets to the Department of Planning, it goes through the NPU process, the Neighborhood Planning Unit process, and there is typically looking at it, any project that comes before us, and this is no matter what district it is across the city, because I always get complaints. It only happens this way in Buckhead, or it only happens this way at Bankhead. That's not true. It happens the same all across the city. So traffic patterns, what's going on in the entire community, the integration of the old with the new, which Atlanta, we're going through a metamorphosis right now. You're exactly correct. We have always had this single-family residential sort of feel, and we've also had zoning by function. You know, it's been residential here, retail here, commercial there. And so we are currently in the process, the planning department, of rewriting the zoning code so that we can have more integrated communities, but that we accommodate all of the old stuff while we're trying to integrate the new. So the short answer to your question is the Department of Planning is responsible for guiding the process, but there's several steps along the way before it ever gets to the committees at council and to the full council. We vote on it after it's been vetted on those 5 steps, and we receive staff recommendations from the Department of Planning, which are predicated on the Neighborhood Planning Unit requests and requirements. Does that answer your question?
Lisa, could you give us an update on the status of the reconstruction of the 14th Street Bridge? And then a second, totally separate question is, tell us what Cousins is planning to do along the street front retail adjacent to 191.
Boy, he asked really hard questions. On the 14th Street Bridge, the Department of Public Works is working on that right now, and I have not been briefed, so I don't want to answer that question because I don't have full information and it would be unfair to do that. In terms of what Cousins is doing, we are just starting to plan, and I frankly stay out of what Cousins is doing in the city for the obvious reason that I have a conflict of interest anytime something comes to the council for a full vetting and a vote. And so what I've done, and folks ask me about this on Terminus all the time, as you heard from my introduction, I have responsibility for marketing and communications, you know, for the country, not just for the city of Atlanta. And so, but anytime anything is going on in the city of Atlanta, I want to make sure I'm not involved with Cousins so that I can be clear to preside at council. So suffice it to say, we understand, you know, my president, Tom Bell, is co-chairing the Peachtree Corridor Task Force. We understand how important the Peachtree Corridor spine is, and that we have a responsibility as a corporate citizen to do everything that we can do to make Peachtree Street viable. So we don't know exactly who we're going to bring as a retailer. What we do know is we want to clean up the not just the block of where 191 is. We'd like to clean up the entire street, but certainly we'll take primary responsibility and a leadership role in bringing new retail. So we don't know exactly today. I don't think the guys know who they're going to bring. They just know they're going to bring somebody and clean it up. Is that helpful? Yes, sir.
Hi, the Chinese ambassador was here a few weeks ago.
He was.
Can you touch on some of the topics y'all discussed?
Sure. Great question. You've been following the news well. Chinese Ambassador Zhou and his wife, Madame Xie, was here for a 3-day visit, and they really enjoyed themselves. We really rolled out the red carpet, no pun intended, because you guys love red too. All right, the Chinese love red. It was an exciting time. The main 2 things we talked about was a Chinese consulate here in Atlanta, and also bring more Chinese businesses to the city of Atlanta. And the third thing, I should not forget, was a direct route to China for Delta. And we talked about that over and over and over again in every setting. There were 3 formal events. The National Association of Chinese Americans had a dinner on Wednesday night. The Coca-Cola Company had a dinner on Thursday, and I hosted a luncheon on Friday. But we hit on those 3 topics every single time. Direct route, consulate, more jobs, more businesses from China here in the city of Atlanta. So we're going to be writing letters, the mayor, myself, and the Fulton County delegation, as well as the state delegation, because the Department of Economic Development at the state level is also, of course, very much interested in those 3 things. So business, business, business is what we talked about primarily. He was well received. His entire delegation was here. The Consulate General from Houston was also here, and he brought his entire delegation. So we believe that we have a good shot at it, but keep your fingers crossed, because that would be just a real boost for the city. Great question. Other questions?
Hey,
Yes.
Lisa.
Good morning.
Good morning. I heard the other day that it might be apparent that you and another Westminster graduate, Clark Howard, might actually be running for mayor at the same time. I'd love for you to address that. And I also have a couple other things to stir the pot a little bit. You mentioned a couple of the great things going on in Atlanta. I'm an Atlanta native as well. And quite frankly, just can't afford the taxes anymore in the city. So moved to just outside the city in Fulton County. I would love for you to address what you think about that, because I think there's a real epidemic in terms of the tax rates on housing in Atlanta. And then lastly, you mentioned a couple of things, the Beltline and also the King Papers, and I was wondering if you could address, just touch on what happened with Wayne Mason. I'd love to know the inside story there. And then lastly, with the with the King family, it seems like they're not happy with anything that is going on with their legacy. I think the Coca-Cola company was offering up some free land for them, and they said that's not good enough or something along those lines. So if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great too.
Wow. Yes, I'll be happy to answer those questions. Let's start with the last one. Excuse me, the last one first. Let's start with the Beltline. I certainly don't want to convey all the ins and outs of everything that happened with Mr. Mason. We have a very thorough process that we go through, as I mentioned to Harriet, in vetting what can be built in the city and what can't be built in the city. I would tell you, because the application has been withdrawn at this point, Mr. Mason asked for 39 stories. The neighborhood wanted 0. Somehow that seems a little extreme to me on both accounts, and I'd say that publicly all the time, that there is always a sweet spot of compromise where people need to sit down and have a conversation about what works in a community. Anytime you go through the zoning process, and I know this as an employee of Cousins because I watch my guys do it, in every community in which we develop, that you can't just walk in and plop something down. You have to build some consensus, even if it's, we have a concept called the Avenue, which is an open air retail shopping destination that people absolutely love, but there's always discussion about how many trees are you going to take down, where are you going to put it, what are the setbacks, how much parking are you going to have. So I think that that project is going to be just fine, but there's going to be some additional discussion between the neighborhood planning units as well as Mr. Mason and his team. We are excited about that project in Atlanta. It doesn't mean it won't have to be tweaked, and I think ultimately it'll be fine. On the King Papers and the King family, you know, last time I checked, this was America, and part of American rights and civil liberties is the right to free speech and to have an opinion, and everybody's got one, right? Everybody's got one. So I would tell you, when the King family speaks, they speak for themselves. The museum is not to be a King museum. It's to be either a human rights or a civil rights or some type of broader context, and so they have the right to state their opinion. There was a meeting held over at the Carter Center, probably, gosh, maybe it's almost been a year ago, that was led by Central Atlanta Progress Mayor Franklin and Ambassador Young, and there was lots of discussion about where to place the museum. And at that time, it had not been decided, as it still has not been decided, whether it was going to be civil rights or human rights, or what kind of museum it would be. Maybe a huge museum with different wings, who knows. The Coca-Cola Company has been extraordinarily gracious. I think they have returned to their roots of civic leadership and said, here's an opportunity for you to place whatever type of building, museum, right here where the economic footprint has already been designed vis-a-vis the aquarium. So we would love to offer this to the city of Atlanta, and they have done so, and we have graciously accepted. So I think ultimately that will be fine too, but anytime folks speak their mind, that's fine. Everybody has that privilege in our country. In terms of the Beltline, oh no, I answered your Beltline question. Taxes. You know, what I would tell you is, watching this influx of people come back, initially folks thought it was just a blip on the radar screen and that there were urban pioneers and that they were coming back to the urban core led by like Georgia State students, because that's really an urban campus. I would submit to you that's not true. A survey was recently done of about 450,000 people that live in metro Atlanta, not necessarily in the city geography boundaries. And folks, 201, it was like 60 or 70% of the people said they were very likely to move into the city of Atlanta. So I think what you're reacting to is the decline of population over the last 20 years. Taxes went way up. But let me say this, you know, the vast majority of the tax money is spent on the schools. It's not spent on operating the city. That said, that doesn't help your pocketbook when you're actually writing your tax check. But what I think you're going to see is some relief over time, and I mean 10 to 15 years, our lifetime, with folks coming back into the city. with all of the development that's going on, you're seeing significant density happening in the city. So we're going to have to go up because you can't just continue to go out. And what that means is more people to pay the freight, less that each one of us individually has to pay. And while I'm on that topic, if you would note the fiscal discipline that I talked about, the 5 straight years of balanced budgets, we actually rolled back the millage rate last year. It was 1/10 of a mil, wasn't a whole heck of a lot, but I think what that demonstrates is that we do have the fiscal discipline to say when there's an opportunity to give tax dollars back, we will in fact do that. Now, last but not least, the mayoral question. Isn't it fabulous to have wonderful people who are committed to the city want to run for public office? Isn't that a wonderful thing? You know, Clark Howard and I actually, like Richard and myself, went to the same high school. We all went to Westminster. And so there's a common bond there, and we all love the city of Atlanta. If Clark runs, I would welcome it. I certainly am interested in serving at least a dozen years in public office, and I have only served 2 to this point. But I would say I personally will always run for an office. I will never run against anyone. That's just the approach that I take. I don't believe in negative advertising. I believe in demonstrating your ability to perform, bringing your skill set, and adding some value. And to the extent that the electorate embraces my approach and my thought and my performance, then I will be privileged to serve as long as they will have me. When they say no, the run is over, the electorate will have spoken, and I will accept and embrace the decision at that time. So if we run, we run. The more the merrier. Always good people running for the city of Atlanta. We like that. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
A simple question. I live in the Summerhill area, and I know we've just gone through some rezoning. My question to you is how, as a resident, can I find out what exactly is in the process, perhaps, for that area? Because the rezoning had to be a result of something, whether it's a developer wanting to develop something. So I was just kind of curious how to find out about that.
Yeah, if you follow what's going on at the zoning committee at the city, and that committee works every 2 weeks is what it is. It's sometimes off a little bit based on when we're on recess. But whenever there's a full council meeting, which is the 1st and 3rd Monday of every month, there's a zoning committee meeting. All the committees meet the following or during the week when there's a full council meeting, and they have a full agenda. And so you can always look on the agenda and see whether Summerhill is coming up or something is going on. Short of there being an active project in the pipeline, you can always check with the Department of Planning, and they can tell you if someone has filed for a permit. And that'll help you understand what's going on in Summerhill.
Thanks.
Can you talk about the trolley a little bit that's going to go up and down Peachtree and how that's coming along?
You know, I don't know much about that. They are still in the process of developing their study and trying to figure out how that's going to work. So I would tell you stay tuned for the report that comes out. It's going to come out shortly. Okay, we'll take one more question. The developer in the house.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
I appreciate everything you said. On affordable housing, is the city expecting developers to come up with the plans, or has the city developed some ideas? Because whether we're focusing in on very expensive areas, which is sometimes hard to be in that market,
Sure.
or areas where you can buy it, but then there's still effects on the local citizens and the housing. Do you all have a plan to where we can work in with the plan? Or is it all about developers bringing ideas?
It's both. I would tell you that the department of the city, and it's really a separate authority, the Atlanta Development Authority is our economic development arm in the city of Atlanta. It's currently run by Greg Giornelli and his team. What we have done is put financing vehicles in place, the tax allocation districts that are incremental financing or achieve incremental financing for the developers. What I would tell you is there is no set plan in stone of this is how you do it. We have put toolkits in place that enable you to come forward and say, I'd like to put a development here. The city is typically putting in the infrastructure so that it becomes cheaper for you to develop where the infrastructure is already in place, or where we're going to fund the infrastructure being put in place. But I would tell you any piece of clean dirt or dirt that can be redeveloped, the brownfields to the greenfields, would be helpful to us if you come forward and say, I would like to do this project. We would ask you to do a percentage of your project, if you have a residential component, as affordable housing. And we have indices and a sort of mathematical problem, if you will, or equation that says, here's what we would like to make you eligible for tax allocation district funding. funds. So it's both. You can bring us your plan, and we have the tools in place to help you.
Affordable housing too, this is ownership of affordable housing, not just affordable places to live.
That's correct. That's correct. Ownership.
And you see it as part of larger plans then, or from what you were saying?
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. What the developers are telling us is that when they run the Argus models, that you actually need to have a larger scale development to make it work. Because in effect, and this is, I think it was, I don't want to say his name because I can't remember exactly who told me this, oftentimes the top tier models are subsidizing to some extent the lower tiered models. So I think there are different ways that you can run the economic scenarios. It has to make financial sense or your bank's not going to underwrite it. But we don't have a formula in place that says you have to have this many at the top and this many at the middle and this many at the bottom. We don't prescribe that at all at the city. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you, Dean. Thank you.
Lisa, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on the improvements and the processes of state government. They're vitally important to all of us, for telling us about the new initiatives and for simply talking about the excitement that Atlanta is today. You are a wonderful representative of our city. We thank you for your leadership. I'd like to give you something if you could come up. We have two things. I only see one of them here at the moment. The first is a piece of glass work by local artist Paul Benzunas. We'd like you to have that.
Thank you.
We don't know whether you play golf or not, but the second one is a golf shirt. We don't have it here today, but we'll get it to you. It's a unique Terry Third Thursday shirt that only speakers at this program receive, and I haven't spoken here. I don't have one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Pleasure to be here.
Remember that we do validate your parking if you brought your ticket with you. If you didn't bring the ticket with you, just simply say Terry Third Thursday as you go out through the gate, and they'll let you out for nothing. I want to remind you of our next program is in January, and it will be Martin Flanagan of Investcap. Thank you for being here. We are adjourned.